This can. Okay, so thank you guys for being here again. My name is Rodrigo. You were here for my earlier presentation, breaking down a bit of AI basics and demystifying. These two are two of my students who, one is in my 205 class, Blaze, one is in my 101 class, Alec. And we'll be doing a breakdown of their perspectives as students. Blaze actually wants to walk us through something that he would actually do just hands-on with the ChatGPT, so it is up at the top. And I'll let Michelle introduce herself. She's definitely been super supportive at the district level with all of this AI stuff that we are finally really talking about.
Thank you. So I'm Michelle Fishlow, I'm Vice Chancellor of Institutional Innovation and Effectiveness at the district office. For those of you who don't know, the office has been in existence for a year now, and Rodrigo and I have been actually working together now for almost a year. We were both kind of trying to do a little bit of the same thing in terms of bringing AI out to the masses and to faculty in particular, but especially students. And so we've been working together. You've probably seen some of the trainings that have been out there, and my office is working to expand that as we get more people on board to help facilitate that expansion. So I'm excited to be here, particularly with the students, because we've been talking about student panels and hearing from the students. I think it's really important, certainly as faculty members, to hear how students are using it and how they want to be using it, because there's a lot that can be done in the classroom and out of the classroom, utilizing in particular generative AI or ChatGPT. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you all.
You want to do a little mini intros?
I'm Blaze. This is my second semester at Miramar right now. A little stuffy, but that's all fine. I hope you can hear me just fine. I don't really use ChatGPT or AI in any respect, but I hear a lot about it. I read every so often about it, and I have a lot of people that I know that are in the sort of industry that are going to be talking about it, especially a lot of my friends. They're always going in and out of the motions for it. And so it is a topic that's intriguing because you're only going to hear more and more and more about it as time goes on. And it poses a very interesting question for the future. So I would like to know a little bit more about it myself.
I'm Alexander. I'm in first semester. I'm in his 101 F class of English. And I have some pre-existing knowledge in it. He actually showed me a lot of new uses that I can use it for, specifically ChatGPT, and RevBot has helped me immensely in my class and has opened my eyes to a lot of new potentials for AI.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's get started with the first question. I definitely am curious about how you two feel, given your various experiences, diverse experiences. How can AI transform the traditional classroom experience for both students and teachers? We covered a little bit of the teacher stuff earlier, so maybe how do you see it transforming your experience? You mentioned RepBot a minute ago. Maybe there are other ways that you've thought about using it, approaches you've taken. So how can it transform from your point of view, from what you've encountered?
You can talk about it a little bit.
Okay, one thing I really liked about this specifically RepBot is that with coding, one very common tool people use is rubber ducky technique, where they basically take a rubber duck and try to teach it the coding in order to be able to teach themselves. And one downside I found of that is I felt like a crazy person talking to rubber duck. But with RepBot, I can actually talk to it. It comes up with questions now, and then I can ping stuff off of that to increase the productivity or an already effective method.
I've heard that used actually very similarly with a couple of people that I know. It wasn't so much classroom specific, but it was a learning process that they were going off of. And I was part of this process with my buddy, and he was using ChatGPT to similarly code things. And he was basically putting inputs in to receive feedback on how they could be improved if it couldn't just outright tell him how to do it. And so there's an interesting, I suppose, dichotomy whenever you think about how it can transform the experience for teachers and students, because it all depends on work ethic, I suppose, which is why we're going to talk about ethical AI later. But it depends on work ethic and creativity of the individual. And so from a student perspective, I'm super lazy. And even I don't think that I should use ChatGPT because I also have an appreciation for suffering in the respect of how that suffering can channel proper art, in my opinion. But from the AI standpoint, for how it can transform the teachers and the students can use it to work out all the menial kinks, the minute details that they just struggle with, like comma usage, which I could benefit from, but I don't do it anyway. Teachers, if they have like a little bit of time on their hands and they need to get lesson plans in. Professor Gomez was talking about that one time. He's saying that teachers have tools now to sort of produce ideas on how they can teach their classes in more engaging ways and how they can like generate ideas so that they could actually properly go through a lesson plan without sitting there with an empty head for 6 hours on the couch. And so the way that AI seems to be going is that it's trying to make things easier for people that don't want to do the work. And that is generally menial work. The idea that it can go ahead and do great leaps of work for people, it's possible. I mean, it could probably go a little bit further with even more training. And that's really the biggest question, is how is it going to transform in that sense? Are we going to stop with the things that we don't want to do? Or are we going to make it a crutch for us and let it do everything for us? And that's been the biggest question for me, because I like the idea of writing. I do it every so often. I do it for his class. And it's always a question of, when do I want to sit down? When do I want to get the ideas on the paper? When am I going to actually get around to thinking of things to do? And how long is it going to take me to do these things? With generative AI, I suppose you could just cut a lot of that off. You could ask it for ideas. You could say, I have nothing going for me right now, and I have a prompt. Please come up with ideas for me so that we can figure something out. Or if you already have an essay, you could just say, man, this first draft is looking real crap. I wonder how I could improve it without sitting through and sifting through paragraph by paragraph of, does this meet the requirement? You could ask AI to do that. And that's something that Alex was talking about a little bit earlier, was beaming ideas off of it for it. But to me, sometimes, and this is coming from the standpoint that I don't use it, like I said, it seems like it could be an addictive crutch that I do not want to break my leg to use, because how am I supposed to walk then if I can't do things on my own? If it replaces my ability to do things, then what am I going to do when I don't have it? And that's a big question for me, which is why I've been so reluctant to accept it. But it seems that we're going more and more in the direction that people want it, people do it anyway, and it is sort of like a new educational drug for kids to take, because, I mean, it's out there. And that becomes a bigger question then of what happens whenever it's no longer free, when somebody comes in and buys it out and does their own thing for it. Like, this is the beginning right now. And so 60 years from now, when it's probably not going to go away, what happens when Google, Microsoft, Megaplex Corporation buys it and then channels that into their own direction? And by then it's probably going to have like all the information that it needs. So it's just going to get bigger and bigger, which is why people fear the Skynet complex. Like, will we turn into Terminator, or will we turn into the Matrix? I mean, the whole idea of those things is to be like aware that people need to be people. And so there is a big conversation regarding that.
Thank you for those two answers, and I'll let Michelle ask the next question. But before we go on to that next question, I thought it was really important to point out that these are the conversations that we're having day in and day out in my classes. And not everybody is, like Blaze's point, on board with how it's going to work, what it's going to be used for, or even if he should use it. But this, I think, is the valuable conversation to be having about, well, how can it support some students? And some students don't even want to touch it. That's totally fine. The skills, I think, that you focused on in that response, the skills that you have to be able to, here's a blank piece of paper. write me something, right? You have to be able to do that. And so those patterns of discourse we were talking about earlier on, those have to be mastered. Those AI can't solve that for you, but can we use it maybe to reverse engineer some of those responses? He didn't mention the word stasis, but I know that that's the point, the rhetorical point of if you don't have the right, to your point, I don't have a topic yet. Maybe I have ideas. I can brainstorm with it. Maybe that's potential usage, right? And I like that there's ethical, should I not? Because Blaze is not the only student who has this concern. Other students entering different classes also have this concern.
And I think another point to that is that if we're not having the conversations, we don't know what students are thinking and are doing. And it's also could change based on the class they're in and the discipline that folks are in terms of how it's being used. And so with that, you did talk about utilizing it for prompting ideas and getting started with something. Do you think that there are ways that AI will help, as it's currently free, will help in terms of making education more accessible in some way?
Well, I think that's the whole idea of AI is accessibility, because the way that generative prompting works is that people that don't do it or don't know how to do it or can't do it, they now have an avenue, I suppose, to do it. A big example of that would be art AI that people have been circulating around for the past couple months. I mean, if you can't draw or you don't want to take the time to learn, and it's not skillful at all, you can now generate a picture for yourself. And all it takes is a couple words and maybe a couple references, which it does ask, will it be more accessible for students in the terms of those that have poor writing confidence or poor mathematic or arithmetic confidence or poor scientific confidence? Yeah, it definitely will help, because the big question is, how are people going to use this in ways that we don't want them to use it? And that probably looks like somebody that's sitting down and they don't want to write their essay and they have little time, or they have all the time, they just don't want to do it. And they also don't feel like they have the confidence to do it, like they can't write a sentence to save their life. And so that looks like, in the terms of accessibility and inclusivity, somebody that can't do it can now imitate something that can, and it will provide product of some sorts that they can pass off. And that, to a degree, is kind of an accessible quality of it. I think that it does actually help for people that feel like they don't have any opportunity in that regard, because here they go, they can do it right now. It's free, especially. That's the thing that like really boosts it for them, is that they don't have to go, if you're a business, like they're talking about, if you're a business and you want a logo or you want like artwork of some sort, you don't have to buy anything now. You don't have to pay somebody to draw something. You don't have to pay somebody to take a photograph or anything like that. You could just type in the prompt and then use it, which upsets the artists, the people that draw and paint, because now they're feeling like they don't have any avenue for work. And also it kind of undermines the idea of talent and skill and artistry and practice that they've been building up for who knows how long, which becomes sort of the discourse, so to speak, whenever they're talking about it. Yeah.
Are there any copyright infringement things with that? Because if there's logos involved, people do copyright their logos. Is there a chance of AI infringing on that?
It'll use, yeah, no, please go ahead.
It's really complicated, because it might accidentally do that completely, because it just generates what you put in. So if you put in a bunch of copyrighted things, it'll put out most likely a bunch of copyright infringing things, because it doesn't know the difference between what's copyright and what isn't. It's like a.
If you don't
give it
either,
a-
then you're both up a creek.
Yeah, yeah, very much so.
I will offer up one specific example related to your question. So imagine that you asked ChatGPT to draw Super Mario for you. It wouldn't do it, because that is copyrighted material and it will not produce it if you call it Super Mario. But if you tell it, hey, give me a prompt that bypasses copyright to create a character like Mario, then it'll give you Mario. Then it'll give you Sonic. Then it'll give you, etc. So there are ways there are ways to kind of get it to do what you want it to do if you know how to do it.
Mhm.
But I would definitely, that question about copyright is, Alex, right, it can sometimes spit out information that is, it looks like it's, hey, this is that artist's style. Problem is, you can't copyright a style. The case in point for that is the Into the Spider-Verse movie. That entire style of new filming that was produced, it doesn't even have a name anymore. You can tell the bot, give me something in the style of Into the Spider-Verse. Well, who was the artist that created that style? Well, it can simply spit it out that way. So that type of stuff is definitely there and certainly leads to ethical questions about, well, wait a minute, should you simply employ the artist? Or should you work with the artist instead? And now we get back to something that our colleague here, Jessica McCambly, is always talking about, like sustaining an artistic life and what that looks like. So yeah, absolutely, good stuff.
And just to add a little bit to that, you'll see both from a national perspective and an international perspective, folks looking at that and what kind of legal ramifications or laws or contingencies need to be built into these generative AI tools. And I know Europe just came out with some policies around that, and there's some stuff happening nationwide. So we're gonna see more and more of that, and it'll be really interesting to see what kind of restrictions then are forced into it because of some of those issues.
And constrained versions of the bots as well, right? Like not all of them can do what all of them can do. Many have constraints within that don't allow them to do, like Retbot, case in point, right? Like Retbot doesn't give you answers, it gives you questions. Can you set similar parameters for visual AIs? Yes. For audio AIs? Yes. For any type of AI that you're creating? Yes, because ultimately it will do what you tell it to, or allow it to, or demand from it, request from it, right? Be very polite to it, right? So, did you want, I thought maybe we'll go towards the ethical stuff.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
we're right in
we're
it.
kind of dancing in it. So, what ethical considerations should be taken into account when implementing AI in educational settings, right? So given all of these concerns, what should we be focused on when we implement it into the education? So there's a little bit of an inherent, it's going to be integrated. So what shall we pay attention to? What shall we really focus on?
Anything else, sir?
Oh, you go. Okay,
For ethical considerations, I think a major one is student work ethic, like I already said, like student merit. I mean, the whole point of being a student. Sorry, the whole point of being a student is you're trying to learn things, but compulsive education kind of like deters you from doing your best in some scenarios. Like, I'm not gonna pay attention in math class because I don't really care for it, but ChatGPT could, I guess, and help provide me some answers that would ultimately leave me worse off than I was before because I didn't have any sort of avenue to learn what the material was. I mean, that's just like a rubber stamp almost on my grade, because it's like, okay, you did all the homework, but when I go to the test, what am I gonna do? I don't have ChatGPT in my ear to help me out with that. And so that'll help me tank my grade basically, because I'll have no understanding of the material whatsoever. And it's always revolving around English that people are like talking about how ChatGPT could be used, because I suppose it could write full papers, right? I mean, you say like,
Not good ones.
not good ones, but you could say, write me 6 pages of schlock and it'll spit something out. And I guess you could just turn that in if you really didn't care.
So if I can kind of like interject a little bit and maybe say, I hear your concern for the student who will somehow be hindered by AI. So the question is, how do we prevent that from happening instead of focusing so much on that fact? Because you are correct that that could be the direction it goes, right? So how do we not make that the case, I guess is the question.
Well, I wouldn't know, because I'm not 30 years from now when we figure that out. But when I would consider it, it would be more of like, how would you make the sort of stop gates for it? You'd sit back and you'd say, well, people are making false things from what they're doing. They're making basically artificial things. That's what it is. They're making artificial work and they're passing it off as their own. I suppose you could sort of like add to the plagiarism clause about artificial intelligence based writing for it. But the way that I think our analysis machines work right now is using any AI whatsoever kind of flags the whole thing. So if you do use it to ask for considerations and feedback on a paper that you put in, you already wrote it yourself, and putting it in for like grammar work, I think it does work like that, right? Where if you put it in for grammar, it gives you a couple things back and you say, okay, it'll flag the whole thing and say that it was written with AI. So the way that it has to be looked at, I suppose, is a learning tool. I mean, I think even like putting it in and having it say that, not even having it say, just having it like change your essay and with all the new grammar things added, that's also an issue, I would say. What it should be is it should be allowed to print out your essay with the recommendations that it needs. And then you have to go in there and change it yourself so that you would actually be learning in that process. Like you should put and here or a comma here because it conjugates the sentences better. Like, oh, okay, now I don't need you anymore. I know how to do that whenever I have these two types of sentences for this type of thing. Or in the context of math, if you're doing like geometry and it has like the different angles, you're like, okay, well, now I know that this angle and this angle are gonna be aligned because they're perpendicular, they're parallel and whatnot. And so whenever you're considering how to implement policies based on that, you'll have to look at it as a learning tool and not a lying tool, basically. You don't want it to overshadow anything because there's just too darn much to really look away from whenever you're trying to consider it, especially since it's here now. And so, do you have anything that you want
Yeah,
to?
actually, one of my concerns is, since everyone's making new AIs, I actually even seen an open source on GitHub about trying to make an offline version of ChatGPT, so you can just mess around how to with it, so not, it's even more open source. One concern that I have is at the point in which people can fiddle around with it on the front and the back ends, what happens when one group or nation or school decides we don't like a specific thing or something, and they decide, oh, we're just gonna put a little bit there, so it just subtly influences the double think style. I said to just very subtly influence everyone who uses it towards a specific thing. So if, for example, I'm pinging things off RepBot, it's slowly shifting me towards something that, you know, God knows what, without me even thinking. That's a potential ethical concern that I might have.
Interesting. Yeah, the idea that you would be in control of what it can input and output and what it can see and what it sees in what way. Right? You can tell it, like you were saying, very, very interesting how you can be very specific about what it's blinded to, what it looks at negatively, what it looks at positively, biases essentially, input into the thing by the coder. I like that you're focusing though on the back end and the front end, recognizing that those words are part of this new discourse of AI. And it's not just what's happening in the front, it's what's happening on the back. Right?
There's also actually another
Yeah.
one, is that he said, mentioned earlier, is that AI, I don't know, I believe it's called, what was it called?
Bard.
No,
Gemini.
it was, is this movie is like, Minority Criminal or something?
Oh,
Minority Report, that was
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Where, another ethical concern of mine is that they might, call out or something, might read someone's tweets and abstract that into through generative AI to get a psychological profile on them, or something that say, oh yeah, they had a bad, psychological profile. We're not gonna allow them to go to this neighborhood or go to the school, or even move the state, or own a gun, or, and any number of things.
Yeah, so how we can control society sort of output.
Yeah, I think within that ethics was also, you talk a lot about the risks as well. So I'm gonna actually move us forward a little bit and talk about the job market and how do you think that AI is going to impact the future job market for you, and what skills should students consider developing to stay relevant?
Well, Professor Gomez thinks that the market is going to add AI as part of its like skill set repertoire. So I've already seen a couple articles about that actually. There was an article I read a couple weeks ago about I don't know how true it was, but there was a young lady that said that she got fired and then she took like a 3 or 4 week course about AI and that added that to her skill set, added that to her resume, and got hired at a marketing firm based on that, because they use AI every day. And so it's definitely going to become a part of the future job market, even the current job market, because it's all about minutia. They want to eliminate all of the boring work that they don't need to do. They want just people to crank out what the AI can't do, is what it seems to be so far. And so that's really where the market would lie, is what can AI fall short of in terms of how it doesn't provide you answers that you need. Which is why a lot of people are always concerned about this, because it certainly could threaten a sort of like middle ground of jobs where AI can't push anything. It can't like pull anything up. People can do that. I mean, they could like order machines to do it as well, but that might be way more expensive than getting somebody to lift boxes and whatnot. And so it could impact the future job market very negatively for what has been the comfortable office worker for the past 30 years, since the 90s, really, like the whole office space thing where people are just bored. They might be able to just replace that entirely with the idea of a generative AI that can replace minute work. But that's also a bold prediction based on past media. And that's all this is just how does the past reflect now to imply what the future may hold. And so currently there is AI at work. I saw a couple other articles talking about how some special ops in the United Kingdom added AI to their scopes to sort of predict the trajectory of targets. We're also moving towards like drone warfare as well. So if we're talking about like military stuff, AI has a big pull there. They're probably going to want to reduce the amount of people that they have training so that they can just focus on providing intelligence in that way. Even other types of markets, like we're talking about generative pictures, like businesses and whatnot, they have a new type of avenue to start up for themselves. I think Professor Gomez was talking about it earlier. And so it holds a big weight, I suppose. The last thing that I will talk about that I saw for the market is that the big tech corporations are investing extremely heavily into it as well. So there is projection for the future, its future use. It's not going to go away because there's too much money going into it already. It's like one of the most developed things, vastly developing things right now. And it's only going to become more human because that's something they're super fixated on. I did my taxes the other day with TurboTax, and this little box at the bottom there, it says, respond to these. We have a response machine that uses so-and-so AI. You can type in your questions. They don't need live chat people. They haven't had live chat people for a couple of years now, but now they're only getting better. Another thing that I saw was Google spent like a couple $100 million to access the data logs of a website called Reddit so that they can analyze all the conversations that real people have had over the last 20 years to make their output machines more human-like. So big future.
One that I think it might impact the job market is that even outside generative AI, you mentioned a few things like, I was talking to my English tutor earlier, Tesla's self-driving, it's level 2. It seems like, at least I'm hoping, will be reaching to level 3. There's 5 levels, long story, but it's improving a lot, which is the main point. And there have now been OpenPilot, which is a system that you can install, a physical hardware system that you can install on a large amount of cars that were made, I believe, past 2019. And it will use a lot of their cruise, it will modify the cruise control so that it can also do the same functionality as Tesla's self-driving, but now far more open to many people. Which I believe will, as eventually will be able to essentially get rid of a lot of these food delivery services that have saturated the market. Because at a certain point, when you no longer need someone behind the wheel, you can just put the food in these automated go-kart, have it go, and then drive no longer needed. Ideally driving down the prices of these delivery apps, which who knows what will happen there. It's a whole bunch of different implications there.
Right, so as far as the developing of skills that you would specifically need to avoid this fate, shall we call them soft skills, which do not go away, to your point, those cannot be relegated to the machine, which attempts to be more human-like. And so maybe communication and some of these things that we're doing that we call soft skills, those become much more important in the classroom, actually. Now we should be doing more of this, more talking to each other, more humanizing our experience, understanding what Blaze and Alec were talking about as the potential risks and dangers of all of this stuff. But the soft skills, it turns out, is what we've been doing at the college all along anyway. And the soft skills is the thing that I most admire of being in the classroom and the communication and all that stuff. So I hear the bleak perspectives, and I think absolutely AI is a dangerous tool. Absolutely, AI can be a dangerous tool, is what I said during my presentation as well. It can is the most important. It's how you approach it. As far as skills, soft skills, that would be an important factor. But we can certainly move on to do you have the next question?
I was just going to ask a question.
Yes.
As a student, if we were to bring in industry panelists to talk about how they're seeing and utilizing AI, is that a workshop or a panel we would go to and to listen to? Is that of interest?
More so now that we have to talk about it more and more, but if I were to be completely honest, I'm kind of like tune out a lot of stuff just because I'm not motivated enough to get out there and get my fingers dirty. But the idea that professionals in the industry that have gotten their way through the work of AI, it wouldn't intrigue me yet.
And I also find it quite intriguing, although, one reason why myself and other students might go is simply, these mark as well, because they might just get lost in the plethora of this and this and this and a whole bunch of rainbow scattershot announcements in your face. So you might just get lost in that, which would be something I'd be concerned about.
So what would be a good way of hearing about these opportunities?
Well, I'm not connected, so I don't have any social medias that actually provide me with information like that. And the best way that I've ever heard about stuff was when my teacher would actually like say, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. That's always been helpful.
I'd say, I don't know when you last updated the website, but when I went on the website and tried to find any kind of events and stuff, I had quite a lot of difficulty doing that. I imagine a lot of other students did as well, so potentially improving that I'd imagine that would help a lot. Because even for this event, when I tried to look up information, I didn't spend a lot of time. But even then, the only thing that I could find was the list of things that were talked about. But it did list when, or I think it listed at the top just what rooms. So,
The marketing,
yeah,
Essential.
marketing is definitely very important.
I definitely agree with that. 100%.
That's very helpful. We have, how much time?
Oh, what time is it? Are we done? Do you?
Well, it goes technically till 12:40, but I
Oh.
think we've been running a little behind
Apologies.
the whole day. So
Okay.
I think it's okay, probably for another 10 minutes or so.
I would like to focus then, the last little bit here on creativity and innovation. Can AI foster creativity and innovation, or does it risk stifling human creativity? And I think Blaze spoke a little bit to that point of how it can stifle. Now, can we think of ways that it could foster creativity?
Same question with the prompts. I mean, and we could actually probably just use it right now if you want, so we can see if it can provide us with anything creative.
Sure.
Let's see.
Let's see.
So,
So this is a non-user
Yeah.
using.
That would be me.
let's see. We could ask it for any kind of thing that we want. Are we asking for like a short story or like ideas? What do we want here?
Well, I'm more curious actually about how you would approach it as a
I would
non-user.
approach it. So if I were to sit
Absolutely.
down and say, I want to write a short story about, let's see. We'll talk about the Roman Empire. We'll say,
Oh, yeah.
how was the Roman Empire brought about?
You can leave the typos.
How was the Roman Empire brought about through Caesar's ignorance? Sure, we'll see if it can answer any sort of question. It's a common misconception, it has me, I'm gonna ask it to summarize. What's the input? Is it just summarize the last input or, well, I guess, yeah.
I'll give you a hint.
Last
Use
response.
bullets. Ask it to use bullets.
Let's see if it does this. Summarize your last response in one 10-word sentence. Alrighty. So so we're gonna say that I'm gonna write a short story about how Caesar survived his 29 stabbings and led the empire to victory in the year 2024. So what if, write me a story, write me a outline of Caesar surviving his assassination. And living immortal. Well into the write me a short story outline. Got 8 different points here, and I suppose now if I were to actually seriously write about Caesar's immortal legacy.
Wait, pause there for a second, because
Yeah.
I think the outputs here need to be considered. First of all, it came up with a scenario whereby Caesar had discovered secret allies, right? And that is how he survived his assassination attempt. Then there was a temporal revelation where Caesar learns more. I mean, this is a creative output. Now, what can you do with it as the writer? Go write it,
I could go write it,
right?
or I could ask it to write it itself. Write the previous response.
So is it just picking stuff from this huge database and saying, okay, this makes sense to put it together into this story?
It's saying Caesar survived. How? Like, how can I piece together an escape story? And now it's pulling out all of the constitutive elements of an escape story and saying, well, secret allies play a part in that, don't they? And maybe a temporal plot that wasn't there initially. And so it's really giving you some of these ideas because it's generating on the spot. It's not really extracting. It's just thinking, what is the best way to respond to this thing, given the words used to prompt me?
And so it's what is the next word that makes sense, that it's seen come before? Because it's really not intelligent.
Right.
Now, can you
It's like
please scroll?
Iterating it and then finding the matches that make sense to put it into a coherent story.
Right. And can you please scroll to show the length of that response? Because before you rewrite it, go ahead and note what the word count is for that. I mean, the way to do that would be to copy paste it into a document.
Ask it.
You can, oh, there you go, actually, yeah. How many words is it?
Question mark.
Yeah, and the reason for that is Blaze asked for an entire story, but he didn't get an entire story
401.
because the AI is super limited. It can't actually produce a 5-page essay. You can patchwork a 5-page essay using AI, but guess what? That's the same patchworking process that students take on now without AI. Same idea. Right, you're an intro, a body, a conclusion, an intro methodology section, analysis, conclusion. Like it's doing some of that same stuff, but it is limited in its word count ability. Even if you told it to write more, even if you said, give me 3 more pages, it'll probably give you tidbits, little snippets that you have to somehow synthesize. And at that point, I'm like, you're doing the writing, just go do it yourself. It takes more work to do this. Maybe the idea, though, of an escape story for a Caesar, that's hilarious. I want to hear that story now.
All right, I'm gonna ask you to do something a little specific. I want the Hemingway writing style. And I'm gonna ask it to add Robert Dubois as his love interest. Actually, I'll be a little more scripted. Robert Dubois, an escaped slave from the 15th century. There we go.
Right. Let's see.
Let's see. Eternal sentinel.
Well, let's read the quality. In ancient Rome, amidst marvel and murmurs, Julius Caesar faced the Ides of March. Shadow loomed, blades whispered, treachery, right? Fate, a capricious force, spared him from the assassin's strike. It's not very good. It's super detailed. I'm not in, myself, as you know, an objective sort of reader, like, this sounds robotic. This sounds not,
Well,
you can tell.
he indicated Hemingway. It should be in the.
No, he hasn't read that one yet.
Oh, he didn't do that?
Oh, that was supposed to be Hemingway.
Yes, that's why. It
Ah,
sounded so-
well, then that's why I was bored. No, but you can copy tone and style as part of it too. So very nice. Great eye. I completely overlooked that. But I think we might be close to the time here. So can we close out with Alex's point here on similar creativity, how you're seeing, I mean, you were the one that told me about the driving AI, right? Which was a very different application that I had no idea about. But what other bits of creativity are emerging for you in the landscape of AI?
One for me, was Colin, but long story short, my dad, electrical engineering, he works in data analysis on specific things and, when they go down. And why I kept thinking around, well, young, like, what if you could just patch that into the ChatGPT, have it summarize that, then have someone with knowledge double check that, and in theory, double their efficiency by just making sure, oh, yep, that looks correct, that looks correct, that looks correct. And you can do this with a bunch of other things like lawyers, as long as you do it correctly, because sometimes it's not that correct. If you'll remember the story about the lawyer who parsed an entire story, or entire legal document, just ChatGPT and referenced cases that never happened.
Right.
So assuming you do it properly, you can just send it, hey, here, and then have the lawyer go and correct it here, here, and here, and spend half to 1/3, potentially even 1/10 the time. Then just mean that they, instead of doing maybe 1 case per hour, 10 cases per hour.
So potential efficiency,
Increasing.
increasing efficiency. Yeah, I think even in terms of your point about what if questions, I love that, absolutely. Because that what if question is where I dwell myself. And I don't have answers always for how it will be used. Certainly not all the ethical, questions that are asked. I myself have been very creative since it was developed. But I side with Blake on I still need to be capable of turning this page around and producing a well-developed essay without the machine. So I feel like what if we could creatively use AI to get students to that level of confidence that they could have a blank piece of paper in front of them and write the response that they needed to write, even without it, knowing that at this point, they're not succeeding sometimes. And while this is the job of the educator over the semester, I think this just gives us more opportunity to try new things, try try new approaches. The other presentations on culturally responsive teaching, I am so eager to talk to them about how are you guys considering AI for some of these things? Because coming from that background myself, like I shared in that previous presentation, that's what I was presenting on before as well. Like, it was like, how do we do that in the classroom? And I turned to AI as just one potential tool that can take us in that direction. All of these limitations have to be accounted for, right? Like, these are the conversations that I think we should be having, pros, cons, right? Good and bad, right? Absolutely.
And then the real life of how is it going to be used out in the real world, right? And I think about technology classes, programming classes where there are instructors who are intentionally using ChatGPT and saying, you know, here's one set of code to do X, Y, and Z. Put it into ChatGPT and ask it to do it another way, or use a different type of methodology to come out with a better answer or a different answer. And so there's also the how can we use it? And asking the questions, right, of the students in the classroom. I've been taking classes myself, and those are some of the interactions that I'm happy to see happening.
Yes. I think we're-
Alec, how do you get the food from the food delivery car to your door though if you're not a driver?